JBNN keep you informed. I'm Michelle Jones, and in the news, Blackman's cousin Tomrick Taylor sentenced to almost 10 years. Please remember to subscribe, like, share, leave us a comment, and click the notification bell to receive our daily news items. Tomrick Fancy Ross Taylor has been sentenced to 9.5 years in prison for being a member of the London gang. Taylor's sentence was reduced from an initial 17 years, having served 5 years, and the 2 years discounted due to no previous convictions. He is the first of 15 members to be sentenced in the long-running criminal case. Taylor is a cousin of gang leader Andre Blackman Bryan.
Okay, let's find out what the health of the police speak and find out what this health situation is. Yes, the officers find out, please. Stay with, okay. With Mr. Bryan for the time being. I will move on now to Mr. Tomrick Taylor. Mr. Tomrick Taylor was convicted on count 2 alone, being member of a criminal organization after a contested trial. How did Mr. Taylor get here? Well, the evidence of the accountant is that when he made his trip to Price Right to kill Dooley, and in this case with Dooley, the evidence disclosed that there was a determined effort to kill this gentleman. The totality of the evidence between the accountant and the driver shows that at least 3 trips were made. So the accountant is saying that when this is the accountant's first trip, not necessarily the first trip to kill Dooley, but the accountant's first trip to kill Dooley, Mr. Taylor was one of the persons who went with him. The driver indicated when the driver, made his trip to kill Dooley, who was eventually killed, Mr. Taylor was one of those with him. Now, when Dooley was actually killed, Mr. Taylor was not present, but what the evidence showed was that Mr. Taylor was ready, willing, and able to lend his assistance to the organization to kill this gentleman. So there is no evidence that Mr. Bryan spoke to him directly or gave him instructions, but the circumstances demonstrate that when he went along on the 2 trips on which he was identified as being a part of, it was quite clear that he knew that he was on a mission to kill, and on a mission to kill for and on behalf of the criminal organization. And by so doing, in my view, indicated that he had subscribed to and joined up with this criminal organization to engage in the business of murder, or at the very least, shooting with intent or wounding with intent, both of which are serious offenses for the purposes of this legislation. Now, the starting point here is to be deduced from all the circumstances of the case. This was a criminal organization that was in the business of killing persons. It used firearms, which means that they either had them themselves as their own property or had access to them. It tended to commit crimes in groups of 3 or more, which means that there were multiple attackers. The offenses were premeditated, and certainly in respect of Dooley, the killing of Dooley or the efforts to kill him. He was to be killed in St. Andrew, and this is a criminal organization based upon the evidence that had its base in Jones Avenue, Spanish Town. So this was not a case of a spontaneous response to something that had happened. It would of necessity mean that whoever was going to kill Dooley had to find themselves at Price Right in St. Andrew and await the appropriate time and opportunity. So if you lend yourself and become a member of this type of organization, then it suggests to me that those circumstances are such that the starting point has to be upwards of 10 years. The maximum penalty here being 20 years. So the question is precisely where between 10 and 20. It is said that the maximum penalty, 20 years, is reserved for the worst of the worst. So I think in this particular case, an appropriate starting point is 17 years, 17. There are no aggravating circumstances personal to Mr. Taylor that would increase his starting point. But it's a Tomrick Taylor. The mitigating factors, there's no evidence that he actually shot anyone despite his willingness to attend upon Price Right to murder another person. or at the very least be close enough to render assistance if necessary or providing moral and emotional support to the actual shooters. He has no previous convictions. The social inquiry report indicates that he is now accepting responsibility. This is one of the persons, or the person that I referred to in my opening remarks, who accepted that he was a member of the criminal organization. So he has now accepted that. For the greater part of his life, he was not involved in criminal activity. The social inquiry report spoke to citizens in Demshapen, where he was known to the persons there as Fancy Ras. The citizens of Demshapen noted that as far as they were able to determine, he was not known to be in any criminal activity. And from the rest of the evidence in this case, it doesn't appear that he was a hardcore member of the criminal organization, but nonetheless a member. His counsel urged the court to take a holistic approach and to consider the socio-economic and sociological circumstances. Counsel pointed out, as was indicated in the social inquiry report, product of a single parent, and his places of abode were in communities that were plagued by gang activity, and the defendant may have found it difficult to resist the activities that were going on around him. Counsel suggested that he is capable of rehabilitation, and that should inform the sentencing or the sentence that the court would pass. The preparers of the social inquiry report suggest that if he were allowed to be reintegrated into the society, he would have a support system, and since this is his first conviction, that is a factor that should be taken into account. It is also being urged by counsel that since he has accepted responsibility and involvement in a criminal organization, this should be taken as evidence of remorse and that he has learned his lesson and has seen the folly of his ways. It is interesting to observe that some of the citizens of Jones Avenue remarked that in their view, Mr. Taylor had no reason to be involved in criminal activity since his mother and his siblings who were overseas sent either money or clothes or material to enable him to dress in such a manner that he earned the name Fancy Ras. The residents also noted that he was a security guard at a hardware establishment and worked at night. So at the very least, as a security guard, he would have some appreciation of wrong and right, even if it was lost on him before. But certainly, part of his instructions would undoubtedly have been to keep order wherever he was placed and to prevent wrongdoers from engaging in untoward behavior as far as the hardware store is concerned. So all of those factors now have to be weighed. As I indicated before, and this is an example of that Mr. Taylor, the evidence suggests that Mr. Taylor would have continued his life of criminality but for his apprehension by the police. His economic needs were being taken care of, both by being employed and by his relatives overseas. The SCR also indicates that he himself said that despite his father's absence and non-contribution financially, his mother made every effort to ensure that he was sent to school. He said he enjoyed his childhood and engaged in the usual childhood activities. So in other words, despite the circumstances, the socio-economic circumstances to which counsel has referred, there's nothing to suggest that there was any inevitability about Mr. Taylor being involved in or with or becoming a member of a criminal organization. This is a man who made the decision to join criminal organization, went into it with his eyes wide open, knew what they were about, made not just one but 2 trips to kill this duly, so it was very clear to him. And while I keep in mind the classical principles of sentencing, namely retribution, deterrence, prevention, and rehabilitation, they do not have equal weight in all circumstances. When you're dealing with criminal organizations, particularly those that engage in the business of murder and arson, the protection of citizens and the population must take preeminence and priority over any rehabilitation. So it is prevention in the sense of preventing Mr. Taylor from committing any further crimes of this nature, at least for the period of time that he would be in prison. It is deterrence in the sense that persons who may not have previous conviction but who have decided to become involved in this type of criminal organization must expect significant punishment if caught, tried and convicted based upon admissible and reliable evidence. The court notes that this trial went on for a year plus, and all during this time, Mr. Taylor's view was that the witnesses were lying on him. And now, having been convicted, it has suddenly dawned upon him that, just maybe, not in his case, maybe, the witnesses were speaking the truth about me after all. To my way of thinking, that is now a tactical decision made to have himself presented to the court as being remorseful, because he sat there from September of 2021 and he had all the way up until March of 2023. And the two witnesses were the first two witnesses who testified for the Crown, and their evidence was finished after a few weeks or months. So he had the rest of the time to think and to reflect on what the witnesses had to say. And if he was of the view then that, I'm really a member of the criminal organization, he could have changed his plea during that period. And so this suggestion now that he's now remorseful, I don't accept. I think he's now trying to curry favor with the court to say, well, if I say that I am now a member, if I say that I am remorseful, I will end up with a lighter sentence. Well, I'm sorry to disappoint Mr. Taylor. That simply won't work here. So this idea that he is remorseful, I don't accept it at all. He's saying now that he regrets his decision to become part of the gang, as it has caused his freedom. He has lost some family connections and so on. He's asking for lenience in the form of a reduced sentence. Shared his intention of starting afresh when he returns to society. Well, that would be a good thing if he does. And really, in terms of her health has deteriorated significantly because of what she had learned about her son's involvement in this matter. So, start at 17 years. No aggravating factors to take it up. And as far as I am concerned, mitigating factor to bring it down would be the absence of previous convictions, which in my view would bring it down 2 years to 15 years. And so we are told that he was in custody for 5.5 years. So we take the 5 from the 15. That gives us 10? And then 6 months, another half a year take notes. So that takes us to 9.5? 9.5. And so now, Mr. Taylor, your sentence here now for being membership of not a criminal organization, but this specific criminal organization now, bearing in mind that it was an organization that had as one of its purposes, which would have been known to you, murder, or at the very least, shooting or wounding with intent. That is to say, intentional harm to the use of firearms to another person. And so if you voluntarily join an organization like that, then you should expect to be treated severely. Well, in the context of the maximum penalty. So, Mr. Taylor, sentence then on count 2, membership of a criminal organization, is 9.5 years, sir.
Just noting for the record that Mr. Bryan is back.
Thank you very much, sir. Where's Mr. Taylor? Stand, please. Can you remove him from the dock now? We're finished with him. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Oh, you wish a break?
JBN will keep you informed. Please remember to subscribe, like, share, leave us a comment, and click the notification bell to receive our daily news items.